The night does not break, it loosens, as if the darkness were a soft cloth being lifted from the edges of the world. And in that loosening, the river begins to glow with the faintest promise of dawn, a ribbon of patient light winding through reeds and whispering stones, and somewhere along its gentlest bend, a woven basket drifts with a purpose so calm it feels like the river itself is thinking. And the water that has carried so many stories carries one more, not loudly, not with trumpets, but with the hush of breath held in a mother's chest, while the sky decides which shade of blue it will be today. And inside the basket a small child sleeps, not knowing that sleep can be a crossing, not knowing that the world already leans toward him as plants lean towards sun, and the river guides him as if it has always known the route between fear and safety, between the place of stones and the place of hands that lift gently and call this tiny life by a name that will echo for generations like a low note under the music of time. Moses, a name that means drawn from water, drawn from danger, drawn from the dark into the wide, slow light that loves to rest on the backs of waves. And as the basket is lifted from the water, the river does not protest. It only sighs, it only says go, and the reeds fold back into their own green thinking. Years turn like pages being turned by wind, and the boy becomes a man who has learned the sounds of palaces and the sounds of his own heart, the clatter of the world and the quiet that lives beneath it. And one day when the sun sits high and the sand burns even the shadows, he walks out into a land that has nothing to say but everything to teach, a desert of long lines and patient distances. And it is here, in the language of heat and silence, that the world begins to speak in a softer voice than words, a flame that does not consume, a color that does not change, a bush that burns the way a thought burns behind closed eyes, steady and unhurried. And Moses stands barefoot on ground that feels suddenly familiar, as if all ground had been waiting to be this ground. And a whisper rises that is not wind, not fire, not even sound, only meaning, only a gentle weight in the air that says your name as if it had been saying it forever, Moses. And then the whisper widens as rivers widen at their mouths. I have seen the burden, I have heard the sighing. I am with you in the place where breath is born. Go back and speak, not with the thunder people expect, but with the steadiness of rain that no stone will open in time. So he returns, carrying not a banner but a quiet certainty, the kind that lets the spine grow tall and the shoulders drop, the kind that makes the eyes of a man look like the eyes of a tree that has survived many summers. And the city meets him, with the noise of labor and the measured steps of guards who know how to stand for hours. And beyond the courtyards, beyond the carved doors and painted pillars that hold up ceilings full of stars made by human hands, there is a throne, and on that throne a man who has learned the weight of crowns and the shape of refusal, Pharaoh, whose breath is a little faster than he shows, whose fingers hold power the way a closed fist holds water, tight but slipping. And Moses does not raise his voice, does not point, does not argue with the heat of anger. He lets silence walk in first. And when the room is quiet enough to hear a single reed bend on the riverbanks miles away, he says, in a voice that wears the dust of the desert like a blessing, let them go, let the people rest from the hands that never stop. Let their backs remember the shape of standing without load. Let their songs return to their own throats, and the words settle like cool shade over hot stones. The answer is stone at first. It is the refusal that has forgotten, it is also fear. And the work grows heavier, as if weight were a language that could outshout longing. But longing learns patience in the company of deserts. and patience finds signs the way eyes find stars once lamps are put out. And the days begin to turn with small changes that feel like the world clearing its throat, rivers that do not behave like yesterday, skies that learn new colors, winds that bring messages in their pockets, and Moses walks through it as through a dream where everything is slow and nothing is wasted. He lifts his staff, not like a weapon, but like a finger pressed to the lips of the world. And the world listens, because it remembers who taught it to be world. And the palace learns that control is a sandcastle with waves for neighbors. And Pharaoh's sleep grows thin. And the people gather their tiredness and roll it up like mats, because maybe soon there will be a night when rest is not borrowed but owned. And the old ones tell the young ones stories that arrive like lanterns along a road, and the road remembers how to lead. One evening that smells of baking bread and distant rain, Moses speaks to the people in a circle of lamps and faces. He tells them to keep their feet ready and their hearts soft, to eat the bread that does not wait to rise because time has chosen them, and time does not like to be kept waiting when freedom has found its sandals. And the lamps sway in a wind that knows more than it tells, and the children fall asleep against shoulders that have learnt to be both wall and pillow, and the night itself seems to lean inward to listen, and somewhere in halls of gold and stone, the resolve that called itself eternal begins to crack in ways only silence hears. And the world takes a breath deep enough to move a sea. They walk, not in a march of drums, but in the footfall sound of households moving, pots wrapped in cloth, little hands inside bigger hands, old songs remembered halfway and hummed the rest of the way, and the road is not a straight line, but a ribbon that chooses softness over speed. And when they reach the wide water that says no to all who do not know its secret, Moses does not argue with it, he does not demand, he simply stands inside the quiet he has been practicing since the desert taught him that quiet is not emptiness, but a door. And the wind begins as a thought begins, barely there, then everywhere, a long exhale from a mouth the world cannot see. And the water hears its own name spoken back to it and divides the way sleep divides evening from morning, gently, evenly, making a path whose walls remember fish and light and the laughter of boats. And the people walk through the middle of a memory while the stars keep watch like nurses at a bedside. Behind them, the world that will not let go tries to learn the language of water too late. It enters the path not made for it, and finds that doors that open for love close for fear. And the sea returns to being sea, which is to say whole, which is to say at rest. And on the far shore, dawn finds a people who have a new word in their mouths, not shouted, not even sung, only breathed together. A word that feels like the stretch of muscles after long labor, freedom. And they sit on the sand and watch the line where sky meets water, and no one tells them to rise yet. And the waves keep their own counsel. And Moses stands a little apart with eyes that carry both joy and the ache of knowing the road is longer than any single morning. And that is fine, because long roads are made for songs that know many verses. And the first verse is always thank you to the ground for holding us. Thank you to the sky for covering us. Thank you to the water for remembering. We are kin. The desert opens its palms again, and they step into its wide quiet, not as lost ones, but as guests. And when hunger comes, it arrives without cruelty. It only says, I am here, and the answer falls from the morning like thin flakes of gentle surprise. Small and enough, a taste like memory. And when thirst comes, it does not shout, it only taps the inside of the mouth. And Moses touches a rock as one might touch the shoulder of an old friend, and water remembers that it lives inside stone as well as sky. and it steps out in a clear thread that becomes a stream, that becomes a pool, where faces lean over and see themselves less tired. Nights are long and kind under this sky, and the stars are patient teachers, and Moses listens to them, spelling out shapes that point not to power but to patience, not to conquest but to covenant, a word that wears no armor and yet stands through. Storm's a word that means we belong to each other, even when walking is slow, even when answers are clouds that take their time to make rain. And the people learn that rest is also a commandment written in the bones of the world, that even freedom must lie down sometimes and let the ground finish its sentence. And in the soft hours before dawn, mothers hum to children, and the hum becomes a river that holds the camp the way the Nile held a basket once. And in that hum is the promise that tomorrow will have bread and water and a path. Pharaoh becomes a story that dust tells to the feet of statues, and the sea goes on being sea as if nothing had happened, and yet everything has. Because water keeps secrets, but also keeps memory, and memory in water is what makes lullabies sound like waves. And Moses walks with steps that do not hurry. And when the mountain that has been thinking for centuries finally clears its throat with a cloud and a low voice like weather, he goes up, not to master anything, but to meet the quiet that started this journey. And the people wait below with fires that wink like small constellations fallen to earth. And the night wraps itself around them all like a shawl that has learned every back it has warmed. What is given on the mountain is not iron, it is not a cage, it is a path in the shape of sentences, a way to keep from getting lost when the heart grows noisy. And Moses carries it down the way one carries the first sleep of a child from one room to another, with both hands and with breath held. And when the people hear, they breathe out as if they have been holding a note for generations. And their tents look new even though they are the same, and their faces turn toward one another, with the softness that comes when rules are not fences but lights along a road. Night by night, step by step, the story moves forward like a tide that has remembered a promise to the moon, and when doubt visits, as all good travelers must let it, it is met not with speeches but with water and bread and the sight of a sky that never seems to run out of stars. And in the spaces between questions, Moses lets silence sit beside him like an old friend. And in that silence, answers arrive the way dew arrives, not dramatic, simply everywhere, and the people learn to gather it before the sun tells it to rise and leave. If you are listening now, with eyes half closed and a day heavy on your shoulders, let the river carry the basket again across the inside of your mind. Let the desert's long breath slow your own. Let the sea open where you thought only stone stood. Let the ground keep you. Let the stars teach you how to wait. Let the whisper that called Moses by name find your name too, and say it with that same old tenderness, not to command you toward noise, but to invite you toward rest, because every long journey has a bed woven into it somewhere. And tonight this is yours, a bed of quiet light laid down by water, sand, wind, and a hand that does not force, only guides, and you can lie back into it now and feel the world, which has been holding you since the beginning, keep holding you, while sleep, gentle as reeds against a slow river, folds over you and closes like evening around a camp that has finally reached enough for this night. Blocked to the lamp that walks beside. Night. The desert keeps breathing in long, slow waves, and the people learn to breathe with it, not in the rhythm of whips or bells or horns, but in the even hush of wind moving sand from one small thought to another. And each evening a pale pillar like a lamp without flame settles near their tents, as if night itself had decided to carry a lantern for them. And each morning a quiet cloud, the size of a promise, gathers itself and begins to lead. not with shouts, not with maps, only by being there where forward is, and they go, never quite hurrying, never quite late. A caravan of households that sound like gentle work, ropes being tied, bread being broken, children inventing games out of dust and shade and the slow drift of time. And in the center of all this slow motion, Moses walks with steps that match the patience of sky, eyes lowered, not in defeat, but in listening, as if the ground keeps telling him tiny secrets it learned from the first day it was called good. And he keeps those secrets not in a book, but in the way he answers when the anxious come, in the way his voice knows where to place a pause, so worries have time to lie down and close their eyes. There are mornings when the manna falls like old snow, remembering how to be new, and it lies on the ground like a kind thought waiting to be noticed. And hands reach out and gather just enough, because enough feels like a word they can finally pronounce without fear. And there are afternoons when water appears where no map would draw a stream, and it tastes like the inside of a prayer. And there are evenings when the heat steps back and the air learns coolness again, and songs move like moths from tent to tent. And somewhere in the hush between one song and the next, a child asks where the lamp comes from, and an old voice answers, the way old voices do, with a smile that can be heard. It comes from the one who knows the shape of your name, even when you are too sleepy to remember it yourself. They make a place for meeting, not a palace but a tent that understands travel. Its curtains breathing along with the wind, its poles remembering trees, its table remembering wood grain and simple meals. And when it is raised, the camp seems to exhale as if it has been waiting for this doorway into quiet all day. And Moses enters when the cloud says come and stays until the quiet says go. And the people learn that presence is not about stone or gold, but about a nearness that has nothing to prove. And in that nearness their hearts, which had been clenched for years like fists around nothing, begin to open. And when they open they find inside not empty rooms but small lamps waiting to be lit by kindness. And the lamps are lit by little things, the sharing of a cup, the mending of a strap, the steady repetition of each day's enoughness. And the little light of these lamps adds to the great light that walks with them, and everything feels less alone. When worries rise, as worries do, because they are like dust, and the world has wind, Moses lets them settle around him, and only then speaks. Not to crush them, but to give them a place to sit. And in that place they become stories instead of storms, the kind of stories that end with, we made it through. And on nights when memories of Egypt come back with sharp edges, he sits by the fire until the edges wear down into smooth pebbles that can be carried without cutting their hands. And he teaches the people to do the same with their memories, to keep them but round them, to let time and tenderness sand them softer, because soft is not weak, soft is what lets you sleep. There is a mountain that watches them the way old trees watch children play beneath. And when the time is right, they come close again to its broad shoulder, and Moses climbs into the cloud that does not chisel or shout, but writes with the ink of breath. And what he brings down is not an iron gate, but a path made of words that walk with you. And the people learn to say them in whispering voices as the lamps are lit, not to scare sleep away, but to invite it. You shall rest. You shall not be alone. You shall not take what is not yours. You shall not forget that your neighbor's life is as breakable and as bright as your own. And the words, spoken night after night, like slow rain, soak into the camp, until the ground of their living grows soft enough for roots. Sometimes they falter, because people do, because hearts get hungry for the wrong kinds of shining. And there is an afternoon when gold is shaped into something that looks like certainty and sings like control. And the song rises almost loud, enough to drown the quiet, but not quite. Because the quiet has been traveling with them longer than panic has. And when Moses returns, he does not come down like a storm, but like a father who has learned that sometimes you gather the pieces and start anew. And the pieces are gathered, and the fire cooled, and the tent raised again, and the lamps relit. And everyone lies down that night feeling the bruises of their fear, but also the balm of being forgiven. And forgiveness is a pillow softer than any other, and even those who do not sleep quickly rest sooner than they thought they could. Days grow into a season, and the season into the shape of an almost home. Not a place on a map yet, but a way of moving together that feels like belonging. And in this almost home, they learn the slow art of becoming gentle with time, of letting mornings be mornings and evenings be evenings, of letting work be enough and stopping being holy. And when the seventh day arrives, it is a landing the week has been aiming at all along. A shore where all boats can beach and tip a little and sigh. And on that day the camp sounds different, less clang and more hum, less orders and more listening. And people notice things they miss on the other days. The outline of a hill far to the north shaped like a sleeping animal. The way the cloud looks lighter on its lower edge. The way children's laughter sounds like water talking to stones. And noticing becomes a kind of prayer without words. And prayer without words becomes a way of sleeping even while awake. There are still lessons, because journeys are teachers and the world has many classrooms. And one of the lessons is patience when the path wins more than expected. And one is trust when the water seems late. And one is gratitude that arrives. Without trumpets, slipping into camp the way cool air slips under the edge of a tent. And each lesson is written not on tablets now, but in muscles and breath, in the calm that comes sooner after a fright, in the steady hand that smooths a child's hair while the wind hums across the ridge, in the easier laughter at meager jokes, because even small joys are big when you are far from the place you began. Nights stretch wider as they move, and stars begin to feel like companions with particular habits. This one rises a little late. That one brightens just before dawn. Another flickers like a thinking eye, and in the starlit hours Moses sometimes sits at the edge of camp and thinks of the river that once rocked him, of the palace that taught him the shapes of walls, of the desert that taught him the shapes of doors, of the sea that opened like a chest unclasped for a friend. And his thinking does not tighten him. It loosens him the way long walks loosen knots. And when he returns to his bedroll, he lies down the way a traveler lies down after a long kindness, with the kind of trust that listens to its own heartbeat and hears in it an old promise kept again tonight. In the mornings he teaches with stories rather than speeches, because stories are blankets that can cover many kinds of cold. And he tells of a ladder that was not meant for climbing but for reminding, of a widow's jar that did not learn how to be empty, of a shepherd who knew every curve of every name he carried. And the children's eyes widen the way dawn widens, and the old ones nod as if someone has returned a tool they had lent long ago. And the day takes courage from the stories and becomes easier to lift. When long shadows of old fears stretch from the horizon, the lamp moves a little closer on its own and the quiet deepens. And this is the miracle they begin to trust most, not the sea parting or the rock giving water, as dear as those were, but the miracle of enough quiet to make room for courage to sit beside them and breathe at the same pace. And in that shared breathing, their steps lengthen again and their shoulders drop, and the road unrolls like a ribbon that has decided to become a path. They begin to craft a grammar of gentleness, learning where to place their pauses so exhaustion has a place to rest, where to soften their consonants so anger has less stone to cling to. And even their tools seem to notice, the ropes complain. Lest the jars crack less often, the sandals forget how to blister. And when something does break, they mend it with the same patience they use on their own thoughts. Thread through, pull, tie, test, release. And the mended place holds with a strength made of both the old fibers and the new care. There are memories of Pharaoh that arrive some nights like distant thunder, not to frighten but to remind. And when they arrive, the camp does not panic. It gathers closer, lanterns ringed like small moons, and someone begins a low song that does not mention kings or whips or seas. It mentions only kindness and walking and bread. And the song goes on long enough to turn the thunder into weather, and weather into background, and background into silence. And when the song ends, no one rushes to speak, because the silence after a good song is part of the song. On a day of gentler wind, they raise the tent again after a long move, and the air inside smells of woven things and clean dust and a sweetness that might be memory or might be hope. And Moses stands there for a while, letting his eyes adjust to the softer light, and he realizes that the soft light is not only inside the tent, it has been learning the faces of the people as they travel. It has been practicing on their foreheads and cheekbones and the corners of their eyes. It has been laying down a shine that looks like rest, and he smiles the way a mountain smiles when it shares water with a valley. And in that smile, any leftover fear forgets what it was doing and wanders off to nap. They count their days not to measure loss, but to notice gain, the gain of a calmer step, the gain of a kinder answer, the gain of being able to sleep even when tomorrow is a long way off and the map is made of stars, and each night, before the lamps are shaded, Moses says a blessing that tastes like cool water. May your breath go far into your body and find the places where worry hides, and invite it to come out and look at the sky. And the people repeat the blessing to themselves as they lie down, and the blessing becomes a blanket, and the blanket becomes a small boat, and the small boat drifts on the slow river of sleep toward mornings that will be gentle. Because gentleness has been planted and watered and sung over like a seed that knows when to wake. If you are listening now with the day still leaning on your shoulders, let that day slide a little toward the ground. Let the lamp that has walked with us step closer to your bedside and place its patient light on your breath. Let your ribs move the way dunes move when wind is careful. Let your thoughts arrange themselves like travel packs resting in the cool of evening. Let the stories that worried you turn themselves over like stones and show their smooth side. Let the river hum the first lullaby again. Let the sea show you that paths can appear in unlikely places, and that you do not have to run, you only have to walk in time with quiet. And the quiet is here, and it knows your name the way dawn knows the line of the hills. And your name is being spoken softly now, not to call you to labor, but to invite you into the kind of rest that gathers courage for tomorrow without asking anything from tonight. And tonight asks nothing from you but this: lie down, breathe, and let the lamp keep watch while sleep, warm and unhurried, begins to close around you like a gentle tent that will be folded only when the morning is ready. Block 3, when the sand learns to bloom. The days lengthen not in the harsh way of summers that press against the skin until it feels thin, but in the unhurried unfolding of time that has stopped counting in chains and begun counting in shared meals, in the sound of water poured slowly, in the pauses between a story's beginning and its middle. And in this unmeasured time, the desert itself seems to lean in, as if curious about these travelers who have chosen to walk at the pace of clouds. Each morning the horizon greets them like a scroll being unrolled, not all at once, but enough to invite another step. And in the evenings the horizon closes softly, tucking them into its curved line while the stars lean close enough to overhear their laughter. The children are the first to see the desert's small offerings, a flower the size of a fingernail blooming between stones, a beetle tracing deliberate spirals in the sand as if writing a message to the moon, a gust of wind carrying the coolness of a far-off place, and these small findings become part of the camp's stories, told as the bread is shared, as sandals are mended, as water is ladled from skin bags into clay cups. Moses listens to these stories as he walks, filing them in the quiet places of his heart, because he knows that freedom is not only a change in location but a change in attention, a learning to notice what once went unseen. Sometimes the journey brings them to places where the wind has carved the land into shapes that look like frozen waves, and in the troughs between these great sand walls, the air feels still, like a pause in the world's breathing. It is here that they rest longer, setting up the tent of meeting and letting the cloud linger overhead like a shade tree that has decided to follow them. In these pauses, Moses spends hours inside the tent, not asking for great signs, but simply sitting in the kind of silence that lets a man hear the slow repair of his own heart. When he emerges, his eyes carry the gentleness of someone who has listened to the earth's oldest song and found his place in its melody. The people begin to recognize that their steps are not always toward a visible destination. Sometimes the journey is about what the road shapes inside them rather than where it ends. There are days when progress is measured not in miles, but in how quickly forgiveness can be found after a harsh word, in how readily a piece of bread can be broken in half without reluctance, in how the songs at night grow more certain in their quiet joy. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, the desert begins to respond to their gentleness. Patches of grass appear where there was only dust. The air smells faintly sweeter after certain rains, and even the stars seem to arrange themselves in patterns more familiar. One night, as the camp settles under a sky so clear it feels like the inside of a jewel, a wind rises not, the impatient kind that scatters embers, but the steady kind that lifts the edges of tents as if checking on the sleepers it carries. With it a low hum, the kind of sound that could be mistaken for distant water. And as it moves through the camp, it leaves behind an unspoken assurance that tomorrow's path will be kind. Moses, lying awake with his eyes tracing constellations, feels the hum enter his chest and realizes it matches the rhythm of his own breathing. He understands, without words, that they are being led not only across land but into a way of being that will sustain them even when the journey ends. The pillar of cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night continue their patient leading, never hurrying, never lagging. The people have stopped asking where exactly they are being taken. Instead, they ask how they can walk more steadily, how they can keep their steps aligned with one another, how they can let their hearts remain open when the wind brings the smell of a past they'd rather forget. In the quiet evenings, Moses sometimes walks the edges of the camp, listening to the soft clink of cooking pots being cleaned, the low murmur of parents soothing children, the distant echo of a song half remembered from Egypt, now reshaped into something lighter. These sounds are the true map. He realizes they are the evidence that the people are moving not just over land, but deeper into the life they were meant to have. There are moments when the memory of Pharaoh returns not as fear now, but as a shadow that sharpens their gratitude for the light. Around the fire, elders speak of the river that once hid Moses, of the sea that opened at his staff's command, of the bread that fell without seeds being planted, and each story is told slowly, not for drama, but so that every word can sink in like rain into thirsty ground. The young ones listen with wide eyes, not yet knowing that these stories will be their own anchor in years to come, that the retelling will be as important as the events themselves. And so the desert blooms not in fields of green that cover the land, but in the softened faces of those who walk it, in the hands that reach out before being asked, in the laughter that comes more easily with each passing season. The journey continues, not toward an ending, but toward a fullness that cannot be measured in miles. And at night, when the lamps are dimmed and the camp breathes as one, it feels as if the sand itself is humming along, learning at last that even in the driest places, something gentle can take root. If you are listening now, let the slow rhythm of these steps become your own. Feel the quiet weight of the stars above you, the steady presence of the cloud by day and the fire by night, the hum of the wind carrying both memory and promise. Let the desert's patience seep into you, loosening the knots of the day, smoothing the sharp edges of thought. You do not need to arrive anywhere tonight. It is enough to walk in step with the quiet, to let the sand learn to bloom inside you as it has beside them. And when sleep comes, let it find you already halfway there, already resting in a land where every breath is a soft beginning, and every dream a path unfolding under the most patient sky. Block for the long road under gentle skies. The road, if it can be called that, is never straight for long. It bends and dips, folds into valleys where the wind gathers its thoughts, rises over ridges that let the eyes see farther than the feet could carry in a day, and always it stretches toward something the horizon keeps secret. Yet the people no longer measure distance by the ache in their legs or the angle of the sun. They measure it in the quiet moments between steps, in the way conversation drifts from tent to tent without needing to be called, in the laughter that begins like a spark and travels like firelight until the whole camp seems warmed. The sky above them has learned their pace and moves accordingly, letting clouds drift in wide arcs that offer shade without rushing the day, letting stars take their time in the evenings so the people can tell their stories without losing the thread. Moses walks at the center of this living current, not as one who commands its movement, but as one who listens for its rhythm. Sometimes he speaks to those near him, sharing a thought that has been ripening since morning. Other times he moves, in silence, his eyes on the dust that rises gently from 1,000 unhurried feet. The staff he carries is less a symbol now than a companion. It taps the ground in a steady beat, a quiet drum for the song the journey has become. When he looks up, he often catches the eye of someone he has known since the days of bricks and straw, and in that shared glance there is the unspoken truth that they are no longer who they were, that the desert has been reshaping them the way water reshapes stone. Not quickly, not loudly, but completely. Some days bring wind from the west, carrying the scent of the sea they once crossed, and the smell stirs memories like leaves in a hidden pool. Those who remember that night speak of it softly, as if naming it too loudly might disturb its place in time. They recall the walls of water standing without wavering, the sound of the wind like a great exhale, the way the sand underfoot felt firm as a promise. The children, hearing this again and again, begin to carry it as if it were their own memory, proof that the one who leads them can make a way through anything. And in a quiet way, this remembering becomes part of their rest. It is easier to lie down in a strange place, when you have already walked through something impossible and found the other side waiting. There are evenings when the cloud lingers low, settling almost to the tops of the tents, and its presence makes the air feel thick with peace. The fires burn lower on those nights, as if the flame itself is aware that it need not work so hard. Conversations drift into hums and murmured prayers, and sleep comes early, not because the day was hard, but because the night is generous. Moses sometimes walks the camp at these hours, the dim light from the tents touching his robe like a hand guiding him, and he feels the weight of his task not as a burden but as a trust, something that has been placed in his keeping because it belongs to everyone and yet must be carried by someone. The road brings them to places where water runs in thin, laughing streams, and here they stop for longer. The children play at the edges, letting the cold flow slip between their fingers, filling small skins and pretending to trade them like treasure. The elders sit on smooth stones, warmed by the sun, feet in the shallows, eyes half closed as they listen to the water's steady music. Moses often stands apart at first, scanning the hills as if reading the shape of what lies ahead, but eventually, he too will kneel by the stream, cupping his hands and drinking in the same slow way he walks, as if to take in not just water but all it has touched on its way to him. When the time comes to move again, the leaving is never hurried. They fold their tents like careful thoughts, pack their baskets with the ease of those who know they will need these same motions tomorrow, and fall into the familiar rhythm of travel. The younger ones skip ahead sometimes, chasing small lizards, or watching the play of light on distant stones, while the older ones walk in pairs, their steps matched, their conversations low and steady. The animals move with them, not driven but drifting alongside, as if the journey belongs to them too. There are nights when the fire pillar seems to burn more brightly, its glow stretching farther into the desert's dark, and those are the nights when the path ahead is harder to see in daylight. The people learn that sometimes light is not for now, but for later, that it stores itself in memory for the moments when the road feels less certain. Moses understands this well. He has walked into many days, carrying the light of nights long past, and he knows that the one who leads them will always place the right light in the right place at the right time. The desert is teaching them to wait without fear, to walk without needing to know the hour of arrival. It is teaching them that every camp can be a home if the people within it carry home in their manner toward each other. Meals become less about hunger and more about sharing. A handful of dates, a crust of bread, a skin of water passed around is enough to make the circle feel whole. And in that wholeness, the days seem to pass more gently, the heat less harsh, the cold of night less sharp. From time to time, the wind shifts and carries with it the distant call of other travelers' herds, moving along some unseen trail, voices lifted in songs they do not know. The people listen, sometimes wondering if those strangers have their own pillar of cloud, their own lamp of fire, their own story of waters parted. Then the sound fades, leaving only the quiet breathing of their own company, and they walk on, content that their journey is theirs alone to keep. And always, in the softest hours before dawn, there is the hum. It moves through the camp like a thread, tying dream to dream, heart to heart. It is not sung, and yet it is music. Not spoken, and yet it is known. Moses hears it as clearly as he hears the wind in the reeds, and he knows it is the sound of a people being made whole. In the stillness of those moments, with the first light touching the edge of the horizon, it feels as though the road itself is pausing to bless them before they begin again. If you are listening now, let this long road under gentle skies unfold inside you. Walk it without hurry. Let each step be the only one that matters until it is behind you, and then let it rest. Feel the quiet company of those who have walked before, the steady presence of the one who leads without rushing. The road will wait for you, The sky will cover you. The hum will hold you until sleep gathers you up and carries you the rest of the way. Block 5, where the horizon waits like an old friend. The land begins to change, not suddenly, not with the sharp edge of a cliff or the sudden leap of a river, but with the slow ease of a story adding a new chapter. The sand underfoot feels finer in some places, as though it has been sifted by years of wind until it is as soft as flour between the toes. In others it grows coarse, mixed with small pebbles that click quietly in rhythm with each step, like beads in an unseen hand. The color of the hills shifts with the hours, pale gold in the morning, deepening to bronze in the late sun. And at dusk they seem to drink the last light until they glow from within. The people notice these things now, where once they might have been blind to them, and in the noticing they find a kind of rest that does not wait for evening, the rest of being present to the world as it is. In the mornings, when the pillar of cloud begins its slow forward drift, the camp stirs, with the measured grace of a practiced dance. Tents are folded not in haste, but with the gentle pressure of hands that know each knot, each fold, each rope. Children help in small ways, holding down corners that flutter in the breeze, carrying light bundles, leading a goat to the line of march. There is no shouting to begin, no command to hurry. The movement itself seems to carry its own quiet authority, as if the journey has become the teacher and all are content to follow its pace. Moses walks among them before the day grows warm, stopping to speak to a family here, to help adjust a load there. His eyes are steady, his voice low, but there is a current in his words that makes them linger. He asks about a child's dream from the night before, remembers a name not spoken in weeks, points out a cloud shaped like a bird's wing, small things, but each a thread in the fabric they are weaving together. To walk with him is to feel the ground more solid beneath your feet, not because it has changed, but because your steps feel seen. The days bring small signs that the land is listening to them too. A patch of green appears unexpectedly at a bend in the path, grass sprouting in the hollow where rain once lingered. A cluster of wildflowers blooms in the shadow of a rock, their petals the color of dawn. The air sometimes carries the faint sweetness of something unseen, perhaps distant blossoms, perhaps the memory of them. At night, the stars wheel overhead, in patterns they have come to recognize, certain bright ones, marking the seasons, slow turning. And always, the pillar of fire stands near, its glow constant yet never harsh. A reminder that even in the open wilderness there is a center, a heart around which they rest. There are evenings when the horizon seems to lean closer, as if curious about what they carry in their songs. Around the fires, voices blend in the low hum of psalms, in the telling of stories that have walked with them from Egypt's shadow to the far edge of the desert. The old men speak of the plagues, of the night the firstborn were spared, of the sea standing aside for them. The younger ones listen with the kind of attention that makes the air feel thicker, and when the stories end, silence follows, not empty, but full, like a cup brimming to the edge. It is in this silence that sleep begins to drift through the camp, light as mist, settling first on the children, then on those whose days have been longest. Moses often lingers awake, his eyes tracing the low shapes of the hills against the sky. He thinks of the promise that lies ahead, of the land they have not yet seen, but which waits for them as surely as morning waits for night. He feels the pull of it, not as a demand, but as an invitation, the way a familiar voice might call across a courtyard, knowing it will be heard in its own time. And he trusts that the one who leads them is shaping the journey as carefully, as the destination, giving each day its own weight, its own shade of light. From time to time, the road narrows, the land pressing in on both sides until they walk single file between high walls of rock. In these passages, their voices grow quieter, footsteps echoing softly. The air is cooler here, smelling faintly of stone and shadow. Then, just as gradually, the path widens again, and the sky opens above them like a gate swinging wide. In those moments, a murmur of relief runs through the camp. Not the relief of danger past, but the gentle satisfaction of having walked through a place that held them close and then let them go. On certain nights, the fire pillar burns with a deeper hue, its heart glowing like embers in a hearth. Those are the nights when dreams seem closer to the surface, when sleepers stir with whispers on their lips, as if speaking to someone just beyond the veil of waking. In the morning, there are stories of familiar faces seen in those dreams, of words spoken that feel like blessings. Moses listens to these accounts without trying to explain them. He knows that in the desert, the unseen walks alongside the seen, and sometimes the boundary is thin enough to step across without realizing it. There is a rhythm now to their days that has nothing to do with clocks. It moves in the arc of the sun, in the angle of shadows, in the slow turning of the wind. Meals are taken when hunger suggests them, not when a bell demands. Rest is found when the body asks, not when a schedule allows. And because of this, even the long stretches of walking feel less like labor and more like breathing, something the body does willingly, without being told. The elders often say that the desert remembers every foot that walks it. In the soft light before dawn, when the camp is still, it is easy to believe this. The sand holds the faintest impressions of their passing, the outlines of footprints blurred by the night wind but not erased, as if the land itself wishes to keep a record of their going. Moses sees this when he walks the perimeter in the morning, and it reminds him that their journey is not only forward, but also downward into the memory of the earth, into the deep places where the quiet keeps its own counsel. And if you are listening now, you too can walk this road without hurry. You can feel the warmth of the sand beneath your feet, the weight of the air just before sunrise, the steady pulse of the fire that lights the night. You can let the horizon wait for you like an old friend, patient and unchanging, holding its place while you rest. The journey does not demand speed. It only asks that you keep moving in step with the quiet, letting it guide you toward a place where rest and arrival are the same thing, and where sleep comes as naturally as the next breath. Block 6. The valleys where time rests its hands. The land opens into long, low valleys, wide enough for the whole company to walk side by side, their lines stretching like woven cloths across the desert floor. Here, the wind is gentler, moving through the grasses that have taken root in thin, stubborn patches, their blades bending and lifting as though greeting each traveler in turn. The sun arrives later in these valleys, spilling over the ridges, with a slow grace, and the mornings feel longer, as if time itself is taking its ease, resting its hands before the day gathers its full strength. The people walk in this gentler light with faces softened by the cool air, and even the animals seem to sense the change, their steps more measured, their breathing unhurried. When they camp in these valleys, the sound of the night is different. The wind moves in low tones, brushing against the hillsides in a voice like deep water, while the grasses whisper in a language older than the journey. The fires burn steady, their light pooling against the curved walls of earth, and shadows gather not in sharp corners but in smooth shapes, as though the dark has learned to be round. Moses often stands at the edge of the camp on these nights, his eyes tracing the rise of the hills where the stars lean close, listening. It is in these places, with the valley holding them in a quiet embrace, that he feels the distance between himself and the beginning of this journey most clearly, not as a gap to be crossed, but as a tapestry woven from countless steps, each one adding its own thread to the whole. The people, too, begin to speak of their past less as a wound and more as a root. Around the fires, they tell stories of Egypt in a different tone now, not only of the burden and the cry for freedom, but of the small lights that lived even in the shadows. A neighbor who shared extra grain, a child's laughter that could not be silenced, the way the Nile gleamed gold in the last light of day. These memories, once too sharp to touch, are now handled with care, polished by the passing seasons into something that can be carried without pain. And in this change, Moses sees the deep work of the journey, not only to bring the people out of a place, but to bring the place out of the people, leaving them free to choose what they will keep and what they will let go. Some days in the valley are marked by the unexpected, a flock of birds wheeling overhead in perfect silence, a sudden gust carrying the scent of rain though no clouds are near, the call of a distant shepherd echoing off the hills in a way that makes it seem both near and far. The people pause for these things now. They let the children watch until the last bird vanishes into the blue. They breathe in the rain's memory as if it were water itself. They turn their heads toward the shepherd's voice until it fades entirely. These pauses are as much a part of the journey as the walking, and perhaps more so, for it is in them that they learn the art of being still without being empty. In the afternoons, when the sun has found its way fully into the valley, the heat settles in layers, warm on the shoulders, warmer on the backs of the hands, but still the air moves gently enough to keep the day from feeling heavy. The pillar of cloud leads them steadily onward, casting a shifting shade that ripples across the grasses, and the people follow without question, as they have learned that each turn, each rise and fall of the land holds its own purpose, even if it is not yet seen. Moses walks near the front, his gaze lifting often to the horizon, not to measure distance, but to greet whatever shape the next stretch of road will take. When night comes again, it brings with it a clarity that feels almost like water to the mind. The stars are so sharp against the dark that they seem close enough to touch, and the fire pillar glows with a depth that makes the valley floor shimmer faintly. The people settle into their tents, voices low, movements slow, the weariness of the day mingling with the peace that comes from knowing they are held by the land, by the one who leads, by each other. In the soft murmur of the camp, Moses hears the same hum that has been with them since the earliest days, a sound that is part wind, part memory, part promise. It is this sound that follows him into sleep, that greets him again at dawn, that reminds him the journey is not only toward a place, but into a way of living that carries rest within it. And if you are listening now, let these valleys open in your own mind, wide and quiet, the hills rising on either side like the gentle curve of hands cupped to hold you. Let the wind move through you as it moves through the grass, slow and sure, carrying the scent of distant rains. Let your memories find their softer edges, the sharpness worn down by time and care, until they can be held without hurt. You do not need to leave this place tonight. It will keep you as you are, letting you rest in its embrace until sleep, patient as the horizon comes to meet you. Block 7, when the wind learns their names. The wind has been with them from the first step out of Egypt. But here, After so many seasons of walking, it begins to move differently. It no longer rushes past as a stranger hurrying to some unseen appointment. It lingers, circling the camp in the early dawn, combing through the ropes of the tents, brushing against the edges of their garments as though greeting each person in turn. It carries with it 1,000 scents, the dryness of sun-warmed rock, the sweetness of a flowering shrub hidden somewhere beyond the ridge, the faint salt of far-off waters, and sometimes, in its layered tones, the people imagine they can hear the murmured syllables of their own names. The children giggle at this, trying to catch the wind in their hands, while the elders simply nod, as if they have always known the desert would one day speak to them in this way. The mornings are slow to arrive here. The pillar of cloud waits until the camp has fully stretched itself awake before moving forward, as if unwilling to disturb the deep rest that has taken root among them. They rise without haste, the careful folding of blankets, the rekindling of small fires for bread, the quiet gathering of water from skins. Moses moves among them with the same patience, stopping to speak to those who look troubled, placing a steady hand on the shoulder of a man whose dreams have been restless, listening to the half-formed questions of a child who wonders what the promised land will smell like. His answers are never hurried, for he has learned that the heart hears better when the words arrive like rain rather than hail. By mid-morning, the caravan is in motion, the line of travelers winding like a living ribbon through the land. Terrain shifts often now, long, flat stretches broken by sudden rises, the ground changing from pale sand to reddish soil to scattered stone. The sky is a companion more than a ceiling, its vastness a reminder that they are not confined, that the road is theirs to follow without fear of walls closing in. Sometimes clouds gather on the far horizon, darkening in a way that promises rain, but often they dissolve before reaching the camp, leaving only the memory of their shapes drifting above the hills. And yet, even without the rain, the air feels cleaner after their passing, as if the thought of water is enough to cool the day. In the afternoons, the wind grows stronger, lifting loose grains of sand into soft spirals that dance briefly before settling again. The people have learned to walk through this without flinching, their eyes narrowed, their scarves drawn close, knowing that the wind is not an enemy but a messenger, bringing news from far-off places they will never see. Some say the wind carries word of other journeys, of other people moving across other deserts, their paths unseen but parallel in purpose. Moses does not deny it. He tells them that the one who leads them leads others too, and that the desert is wide enough for every road meant to be walked. When they stop for the evening, the fires are lit in small circles, their light flickering, over faces lined not only by sun and age, but by the deepening peace of belonging. The meals are simple, bread baked on hot stones, lentils simmered slowly, water poured into shared cups, but they are eaten with the unspoken gratitude of those who know what it is to go without. Conversations drift lazily, the days, small wonders traded like precious coins, a bird nesting in the crook of a tree, a cluster of figs found along the way, the laughter of children echoing against the stone walls of a pass. Moses sits with the elders as the night deepens, listening as they speak of the patterns they have begun to see in the journey. They talk of how certain places seem to call them back in memory, how certain nights feel heavier with presence than others. One elder, her hair white as desert blossoms, says she dreams often of a voice calling from beyond the horizon, always just close enough to hear, but never so near that she can see its face. Moses smiles at this, for he has known that voice all his life, and he understands that some calls are meant to be followed step by step, never rushed. The pillar of fire stands quietly nearby, its glow steady, its warmth subtle but constant. The stars gather above it like curious witnesses, their cold light mingling with its living flame. In the quiet, the wind returns, moving through the camp, with a touch that is almost deliberate, as though it has learned not just their names, but their moods. It slips inside the tents, stirring the edges of blankets, cooling the brows of sleepers, carrying away the heat that lingers from the day. And as it moves, it hums softly, a tone that shifts just enough for each person, like a lullaby adjusted to the ear it is meant for. Some nights, the wind speaks more clearly, carrying with it the faint sound of water even when no stream is near. On these nights, the people dream of rivers, of the Nile in its broad, slow majesty, of the Red Sea standing aside like two great walls, of streams that spring suddenly from rock. In the morning, they wake with the taste of coolness in their mouths, as though they had been drinking all night. Moses takes this as a sign, a reminder that the one who provides does so not only in the visible and the present, but also in the unseen and the dreamed. The rhythm of the days continues, each one distinct yet woven into the next, the wind a constant thread tying them together. They begin to greet it when it rises in the morning, to thank it when it cools the afternoon, to bless it when it carries their prayers into the night. It is no longer something that simply happens around them. It is part of them now, as much a companion as the cloud and the fire. Moses knows that when they finally reach the land they have been promised, they will miss this wind, not for its relief from the heat or its stories from afar, but for the way it has known them, held them, spoken to them without words. And if you are listening now, let the wind of this journey find you too. Let it circle you with its patient touch. Learn your name in its own quiet way. Carry away the dust of the day from your shoulders. Let it hum to you in a tone only you can hear, a note that steadies your breathing, loosens the knots of your thoughts, and lays you down in the cool sand where sleep comes as easily as the next breath. The road will wait, the horizon will keep its place, and the wind, faithful as a friend, will keep watch until you wake. Block 8 nights that remember tomorrow. There are nights in the desert when the darkness feels older than the hills, when the stars appear not as scattered sparks, but as windows into another sky beyond this one, each framed by the slow turning of time. On such nights, the camp settles early, the fires drawn small to let the heavens keep their light, and the people lie back on blankets or directly on the sand, watching the constellations shift like slow dancers keeping to a rhythm no human ear can catch. The air is cool, carrying the faint scent of ash from the cooking fires, the lingering tang of the day's dust, and something else, a sweetness that no one can name, as though tomorrow itself has sent an envoy to walk quietly among them, reminding each sleeper that there is more yet to come. Moses walks the perimeter of the camp on these nights, the glow of the fire pillar behind him casting his shadow long across the ground. He moves without hurry, listening to the layered sounds that rise and fall like the breath of a single body. A child murmuring in sleep, the soft clink of pottery being set aside, the gentle rustle of fabric as someone shifts beneath a blanket. Now and then he pauses, looking up at the sky as though searching for a particular star. He has no need to count the days left in their journey. He knows they will arrive when they are meant to, and that the road itself is part of the promise. But still, he finds comfort in tracing the old patterns above, in knowing that some lights have guided travelers long before his own steps began, and will guide others long after they have reached their rest. The people have grown accustomed to these open nights, when the sky is their roof and the earth their bed. They speak of dreams that feel more like visions, where the land ahead opens before them in green abundance, where rivers run clear and trees bear fruit without toil. In the morning they rise with the echo of these dreams still in their minds, their eyes brighter, their steps lighter. Moses does not question these visions. He believes they are gifts, reminders that the journey has a destination worth every mile, even if the sight of it is given only in glimpses. There are evenings when the wind carries distant sounds, the faint roar of water over stone, the low rumble of thunder far beyond the horizon. The children ask if these are signs that rain will come, and the elders smile, saying that sometimes the desert speaks in the language of other places, letting them borrow the memory of storms, even if none will visit tonight. On such nights, the air feels thick with waiting, as though the land itself is holding its breath. The people wrap themselves in blankets and sleep deeply, waking with the sense that something has passed through the camp, not a threat, but a presence, leaving behind a quiet unlike any other. Mornings after these nights are slow and tender. The sun climbs gently, the cloud pillar lifting its base from the earth as if reluctant to break the spell. The people move with the unhurried ease of those who have been well kept in their sleep. They share bread and water in companionable silence, the children playing softly, their voices blending with the muted calls of desert birds. Moses speaks little on these mornings, letting the peace linger as long as it will, knowing that such stillness cannot be forced and should never be rushed away. The road, when they take it again, feels almost like an extension of the night, the steps falling in the same slow cadence as dreams, the horizon unfolding with the same patience as the constellations. The land is open here, rolling in gentle rises, the colors shifting with each hour from gold to amber to the deep blush of sunset. Shadows stretch long in the late day, and the people walk through them as though passing through the soft edges of memory. When they camp again, the fires are placed in a wide ring, their light pooling inward, the center left open to the starlight. The elders tell stories here, their voices low and measured, speaking of the days when they first left Egypt, of the fear that clung to them like dust, of the first time they saw the sea open and knew it was not by their own strength. These stories are told not to relive the fear, but to remember the deliverance, to place the present moment within the larger thread of what has already been given. The young ones listen, their eyes reflecting both fire and star, and somewhere in the space between the two lights, hope grows quietly. On certain nights, the fire pillar dims almost to an ember, its warmth felt more than seen. These are nights of deep rest, when the camp breathes as one and even the wind seems to pause. Sleep comes quickly, carrying with it the sense that tomorrow is not something to chase, but something that will meet them exactly where they are. Moses lies awake for a while on these nights, feeling the coolness of the sand through his cloak, the weight of the sky pressing gently down. He thinks of the promise given, of the trust it asks in return, and he finds himself smiling in the dark, not because the way is short, but because the way is sure. And if you are listening now, let these nights that remember tomorrow settle over you like a soft cloak. Let the stars above you be more than light. Let them be windows to what waits ahead, steady and unblinking. Let the air carry to you the scent of places not yet seen, the echo of rivers not yet crossed, the memory of fruit not yet tasted. You do not need to hurry toward them. They will come to meet you in their time. For now, the night is enough, the ground is steady beneath you, and the promise is as close as your next breath. Sleep in that knowledge, and wake in the quiet certainty that tomorrow is already on its way. Block 9. The path that walks with them. By now, the journey has become more than a line across the desert. It has become a presence, as if the path itself is aware of their steps, shaping itself gently beneath them, choosing where to narrow and where to open, when to climb and when to smooth into easy stretches. It is no longer just a road they follow. It walks with them, listening to the sound of their sandals, the murmur of their voices, the silences between their words. The people feel this without speaking it, an unspoken trust that the land knows them now, that each rise and bend is part of a larger conversation between their feet and the earth. The mornings begin with a kind of quiet that is more alive than stillness. Before the cloud lifts, the camp is a soft weave of low sounds, the crackle of small fires coaxed back to life, the rustle of fabric as tents are folded, the muted laughter of children chasing one another through narrow paths between sleeping mats. The air is cool enough to carry the scent of last night's embers, and Moses walks slowly through it, greeting those who meet his eye, touching the shoulder of a shepherd, adjusting a strap, pausing to share a handful of dates with a boy still half asleep. These gestures take no effort. They are simply part of the rhythm now, as natural as the way the horizon lightens without anyone needing to command the sun to rise. Once the pillar of cloud begins its steady forward drift, the company moves as one, not in a rigid column, but in a breathing line that ebbs and flows with the land. The sound of walking fills the air, softened by the sand, punctuated by the occasional call between families, the distant bleating of goats, the low rumble of cartwheels. In this sound there is no urgency, only the steady assurance that each step will bring them where they need to be when they need to be there. The desert seems to accept their presence now, offering small mercies, a patch of shade beneath a rocky overhang, a cool breeze funneled through a narrow pass, a thin stream trickling from a crack in the stone just when thirst has begun to press more heavily on the mind. At midday, when the heat swells and even the shadows retreat, the cloud settles low to spread its shade across them. They pause, unrolling mats, passing water skins, breaking flatbread into pieces that are shared without counting. Conversation is light here, voices soft to spare the air its work. Moses often sits apart during these rests, his back against a stone, eyes half closed, letting the murmur of the camp fold around him like a blanket. He listens without trying to follow the words. It is enough to hear the tone, the rise and fall of voices at ease. When they walk again, the afternoon light seems thicker, gilding the edges of the hills, making each grain of sand catch and hold a moment of gold before letting it go. The path winds in gentle arcs, revealing and concealing the horizon as though teaching patience. And always, the people follow not because they are told to, but because the path has become part of them, its turns and inclines as familiar as their own breathing. Evening arrives in layers, the lowering of the sun, the lengthening of the shadows, the cooling of the air, the deepening of the fire pillars' glow. The camp is set with unspoken coordination, tents raised, fires lit, water fetched, and then the circle of night begins. Meals are eaten slowly, stories told without rush, the day's small wonders passed from voice to voice. A child describes the strange shape of a cloud seen in the morning. An elder recalls a song sung by the river in Egypt. Someone laughs, and the sound moves through the camp like light through a pool of water. Moses walks the outer ring of the camp before settling to rest, his eyes tracing the sweep of the stars above. He knows they are still far from their promised destination, but he does not measure the road in miles anymore. The measure now is in the way fear has loosened its grip, in the way hope rests more easily on the faces of the people, in the way even the smallest among them walk with steps that seem to trust the ground. The path has been walking with them long enough to know their weight, and it carries them without protest. Some nights the wind comes quietly, barely enough to stir the flames, yet somehow it carries the scent of places ahead, green places, wet places, places where the air hums with life not yet touched by their hands. The people breathe it in, without speaking, their eyes turning briefly toward the horizon before closing in sleep. The dreams are deep on these nights, filled with images of cool water, ripe fruit, and rest under wide trees. In the morning, they wake with a softness in their movements, as though a part of them has already been there and returned with a memory to keep. The road continues, and they with it, each step another word in a sentence that only the journey itself will be able to finish. And if you are listening now, you can feel that same path beneath your own feet, steady, patient, knowing your pace. You do not have to rush it. The road will walk with you, carry your weight without complaint, lead you forward without forcing the day to end before it is ready. Let it match your breathing, let it learn your name, and in that gentle knowing, find the rest that waits between each step. The rest that carries you without your even noticing, until sleep gathers you the way the horizon gathers the last light of day. Block 10, the nearness that walks unseen. There comes a stretch of days when the air itself feels changed, though no one can point to why. The light seems to hold a softer edge, the horizon draws a little nearer in the eye, the nights cradle their sleep more deeply. The people move through these days with a quiet expectancy, as though the ground under their feet hums with news it has not yet spoken aloud. They do not walk faster. The pace remains the same, steady and patient, but there is a different weight. In the steps, a balance between the tiredness of the long road and the pull of something approaching. In the early mornings, when the first pale strands of light weave their way through the folds of the hills, the cloud pillar stirs, almost imperceptibly, as though it has been watching them sleep and now leans forward to guide them on. The camp moves without command, mats rolled, fires cooled, water skins sealed. The day beginning, not in haste, but in a shared understanding that it is time. Moses watches this quiet choreography with a sense of gratitude so deep it feels like an extra heartbeat. There was a time when each departure was heavy with questions. Where are we going? How far must we go? Will there be enough? Now, the questions have fallen silent, not because all answers have been given, but because trust has taken their place. The path here winds through gentle rises, each crest offering a view that tempts the heart to imagine what lies beyond. Next, the wind moves in long, even breaths, cool against the face, carrying scents that seem impossibly out of place in the desert. A whisper of green things, the faint tang of running water, a sweetness like fruit warmed in the sun. The children notice first, their voices rising in excitement, pointing toward the hills as though the promise itself might be just on the other side. The elders smile at this, remembering the countless times they have felt such anticipation, knowing that the journey teaches patience by offering glimpses before gifts. At midday, the cloud widens its base, shading them in a soft canopy. The heat is still present, but tempered, as if even the sun has agreed to walk more gently beside them. They rest longer here, eating in the shade, drinking slowly, speaking in low tones. Moses sits among them rather than apart, his staff laid across his knees. his gaze on the smallest details, the way a handful of grain slips through a child's fingers, the slow turn of a head listening to a far-off sound, the shadow of a bird passing overhead. These moments are as much the journey as the miles, the kind of moments that will remain in memory long after the road itself is finished. The afternoons bring a golden light that lingers on every surface it touches, making the sand and stone glow as though lit from within. Their shadows grow long ahead of them, stretching toward the horizon like messengers running ahead to announce their coming. In these hours, the quiet is different. Not the stillness of rest, but the stillness of nearness, the kind that settles over a house when someone you love is about to arrive. The people feel it, though few speak of it. It is enough to walk, to let the road carry them as much as they carry themselves. Evening comes in layers, the sun lowering, the fire pillar brightening, the air cooling in slow waves. The camp is set with the practiced ease of many seasons, the fires lit in small, steady flames, the tents anchored against the gentle night wind. Around the fire circles, voices are softer, the stories shorter, as though everyone is saving some part of their breath for tomorrow. Moses walks among them, stopping here and there to listen, to laugh quietly at a child's observation, to share a cup of water. His presence is not a command, but a reassurance, like the glow of the fire pillar itself, steady, near constant. When the stars rise, they seem closer, brighter, their light sharper against the deep dark. Moses lies back for a while, eyes open to the great spread above him, remembering the nights in Egypt when the same stars shone unseen beyond walls. The nights in Midian when the same constellations burned over the desert he thought he would never leave. They have been with him through every chapter, silent witnesses to the shape of his life, and he feels now that they too are leaning closer, as if they too sense the nearness of what has been promised. Some nights in this stretch bring dreams. To many in the camp, dreams of a land rich with water, of fields that sway in a wind warm with life, of a table set under the open sky where no one hurries to eat. They wake from these dreams with the taste of them still in their mouths, as though they had been more than visions. Moses hears these accounts in the morning and simply nods, for he too has walked in such dreams, and he knows they are not mere imaginings, but invitations. The road continues, each step another measure in a song too vast for them to hear in full. And if you are listening now, you can feel that same nearness, as if something in the air around you has leaned in, as if the next breath could carry you a little closer to what you have been waiting for without even knowing it. Let that feeling rest in you. Do not chase it. Do not try to hold it. Walk at the same unhurried pace as those in the story, trusting that what is meant will arrive in its own time, and that even now it is already walking unseen beside you. And when sleep comes, let it come as this nearness does, quietly, fully, without asking for anything in return but your willingness to rest. Block 11, the long shadow of arrival. The land before them has begun to change in ways so subtle that only those who have walked this far can feel it. The color of the sand carries more warmth now, touched with threads of ochre and copper that catch the light in the late afternoon. The wind moves differently too, no longer with the restless edge of open desert, but with the measured breath of a place that has known many arrivals and departures, as if it remembers the weight of every footstep that has crossed it. The people notice this in small ways, in the way their eyes linger longer on the horizon, in the way the taste of water seems fuller, in the way the nights feel shorter, even though the stars keep their same patient watch. Each morning begins. with a hush that feels like the space before a word is spoken. The camp stirs slowly, not out of weariness, but from a shared sense that each day deserves to be opened carefully, like a gift wrapped in layers. The pillar of cloud lifts without rush, and the people rise to follow it with the steady calm of those who know they are drawing closer to something that cannot be measured by distance alone. Moses watches them as they move, the children now walking with surer steps, the elders holding themselves with quiet dignity, the middle years carrying the loads without complaint. There is a strength among them now that was not there in Egypt, nor in the first months of wandering. It has been shaped by heat and wind, by hunger met and thirst quenched, by nights under a sky too vast to hold all their fears. The road itself seems to walk differently here. It curves in long, sweeping arcs, giving glimpses of the land ahead without revealing too much. From certain rises, they can see clusters of trees far in the distance, their green so deep it seems. To drink the sun, the air carries scents that are no longer the dry perfumes of the desert. Alone, there is the faint spice of leaves, the soft sweetness of water hidden somewhere out of sight, the promise of soil rich enough to hold roots. These signs pass through the camp like quiet fire, warming hearts without sparking haste. At midday, the heat is gentler than it once was, the shade of the cloud falling wide and cool across their resting place. They share meals that seem to taste better here, though the bread and lentils are the same, though the water is drawn from the same skins. It is not the food that has changed, but the way they eat it, with the knowledge that soon the ground beneath them will not be the ground they must leave behind each morning, that soon the tents will not need to be taken down before the sun climbs high. They do not speak of this often. The hope is too precious to be handled carelessly. It lives in their eyes, in the small smiles exchanged as they watch the horizon. When they walk again, the afternoon light pours over them like a blessing, filling the spaces between them with gold. The shadows grow long and lean toward the direction they travel, as if drawn forward by the same unseen pull that moves their steps. Moses feels it too, a quiet urgency that is not about speed, but about readiness. His mind moves between the memory of all they have passed through and the thought of what waits ahead. He does not let his gaze linger too long on the horizon. Instead, he watches the people, reading in their faces the truth that the journey has already begun to transform into the place they seek. Evenings in this stretch are filled with a different kind of quiet. The fires burn low, their light steady, but subdued. The stories told around them are shorter now, not because there is less to say, but because the words are being saved for what comes next. There is more listening than speaking, more looking than telling. The pillar of fire stands close, its glow warm and constant, casting a light that feels more like the presence of a companion than a torch. The stars gather overhead, their positions as familiar now as the lines of the hand, their light mingling with the fire in a silent chorus. Some nights bring dreams so vivid that waking feels like a second arrival. People speak of walking through fields where the air hums with life, of sitting by streams that seem to know their names, of tasting bread that needs no baking because it has been made in the heart of the earth itself. These dreams leave them quiet in the mornings, moving with the care of those carrying something fragile. Moses hears their accounts and feels the same weight in his own chest, the same sense that the boundary between what is promised and what is present is growing thin. The road narrows sometimes, as if testing their closeness, then opens wide again, offering space for them to walk together in clusters. The land undulates gently, its curves like the breathing of some great resting thing, and always the sense of nearness walks with them, a shadow they cannot see but can feel in the way their steps land lighter, in the way their eyes seek the far line of the land more often than before. And if you are listening now, you can feel that same long shadow of arrival in your own breathing. It is the quiet knowledge that something long carried is beginning to set itself down, that the waiting has already begun to give way to receiving. You do not have to reach for it tonight. You need only rest in the certainty that it is moving toward you as surely as you are moving toward it. Let that certainty be the pillow beneath your head, the steady rhythm in your chest, the warmth in your hands. Sleep in it as the people sleep now, with the horizon leaning closer, with the stars keeping their silent watch, with the road itself walking beside you until morning. Block 12. The rest before the gate. There comes a time in the journey when the days seem to fold into one another, not because they are the same, but because they move with such harmony that the edges between them blur. The people wake each morning as if they have been carried forward in their sleep, their bodies already aligned with the path before their eyes open. The camp stirs in a quiet rhythm. Mats rolled, fires doused, belongings gathered, not as a list of tasks, but as the gentle progression of a song they have been singing together for years. The air is cool in these early hours, the wind brushing lightly over the tents as though offering a blessing before they go. The pillar of cloud waits until the last of them is ready, its base curling like soft mist above the ground. When it moves, the people follow without the need for words. Moses walks near the front, his eyes calm, his steps even, his mind holding both the memory of where they have been and the nearness of what lies ahead. The road rises and falls gently now, each crest offering a view that feels like an intake of breath, stretches of open land, patches of green deep and shallow valleys, distant glimmers of water that catch the sun like scattered coins. They walk without hurry, though the air itself carries a sense of anticipation, as if the land is drawing them forward. The wind comes more often from ahead than from behind, carrying scents that do not belong to the desert alone, the dampness of shaded stone, the sweetness of unseen blossoms, the faint coolness of flowing water. The children notice these first, calling them out to their parents, who smile without correcting them. Everyone knows now that these signs are not illusions. They are the early notes of a promise beginning to take shape. By midday, the cloud spreads wide to cast its shade, and they rest in a hush that feels different from the pauses of earlier days. This is not the deep exhaustion of the beginning, nor the measured patience of the long middle stretch. It is the quiet of people holding their breath, sensing that the long season of movement is nearing a shift. The meals are simple but shared with an almost ceremonial care, as though each bite, each sip, should be remembered. Moses moves among them, pausing to speak with the elders, to bend and hear the questions of the youngest, to sit in silence beside those whose eyes are fixed on the far horizon. When the afternoon walking begins, the sun leans low enough to gild the path ahead. Shadows stretch long, and the light spills into every hollow, touching even the smallest stones. The sound of walking becomes the dominant voice, sandals brushing sand, the soft clink of pottery, the low hum of a song someone has begun without thinking. The hills ahead grow more distinct, their slopes softened by the touch of something other than desert wind, and the spaces between them hint at passageways into another kind of land. Evening settles slowly, the fire pillar blooming into light as the last edge of the sun drops away. The camp is set with a sense of quiet ceremony, the tents pitched in neat circles, the fires lit and kept low, the night allowed to keep its depth. Around the flames, the stories told are fewer, but the silences between them are rich. Silences that hold memory, gratitude, and the unspoken acknowledgement of what is near. The children fall asleep sooner, their faces turned toward the warmth of the fires, their breathing deep and even. The elders stay awake a little longer, watching the sky as though reading the final lines of a story they have carried in their hearts. Moses walks alone to the edge of camp, the staff in his hand light against the ground. The horizon ahead is dark now, but he knows it by shape, by the way the air changes when he faces it. He closes his eyes and lets the sounds of the camp wash over him, the murmur of voices, the occasional crackle of fire, the rustle of fabric in the night wind. He breathes it in as though storing it, knowing that soon this rhythm will change, that the movement they have known for so long will give way to another kind of life. Yet there is no sadness in him, only the deep peace of a task nearly fulfilled. Some nights in this resting place are touched by dreams that seem to rise from the land itself, dreams of green fields spreading beyond sight, of rivers that sing, of bread that tastes of the earth and the sky at once. The dreamers wake with the sense that they have already stepped into the promise, even if their feet have not yet crossed the threshold. They rise quietly, not wanting to disturb the stillness, carrying the dream within them like a small flame. The days here do not rush forward. They hold themselves open, allowing the people to gather their strength, to sit with their memories, to let the long journey settle into their bones. Children play in the cool hours, weaving games from the shapes of stones and the paths between tents. Adults share tasks without the weight of necessity, mending garments, sharpening tools, filling skins, all with the sense that these simple acts are part of preparing for something greater. And if you are listening now, you too can rest before the gate. You do not need to step through it tonight. You can let the nearness be enough. Let the promise wait just beyond the horizon while you gather yourself for the crossing. Feel the coolness of the evening on your skin, the warmth of the fire close by, the steady breath of those around you. Let your own breath match theirs, slow and deep, until the quiet seeps into you like water into thirsty ground. Sleep here, in the rest before the gate, knowing that the dawn will bring what it must, and that you are already where you need to be for this night. Block 14. The river that teaches the heart to cross. The green rises like a low song that the earth has been humming forever. And as the people stand at the edge of this widened world, they feel the air become round, fuller in the lungs, cooled by currents that have learned the names of leaves. And the hush that falls across the camp is not the hush of fear, but the hush of entering a room where something beloved has been waiting with patient hands. And the river that unspools before them is not a wall, not a line drawn to deny, but a long shining page where their steps will write quiet ink made of trust, and the current will carry every letter safely forward. They sit in a wide arc that opens toward the river, and the wind moves from bank to bank like a messenger who knows both languages, carrying the cool breath of water to faces still warm from years of sun, and children lean forward with hands on the ground as if bracing themselves against beauty, and elders lean back as if to make more room for the view to enter. And the middle years exhale with that particular sound that belongs to travelers who have discovered that the horizon can be kind. And in the quiet Moses feels the same stillness that once stood inside a burning bush, a stillness that filled a sea with a road, a stillness now breathing over water that says, not hurry, not prove, only come as you have learned to come. And the grass along the bank flattens under a breeze, as if nodding its consent. and the far shore wears dawn like a shawl that someone loving placed on its shoulders before the camp awoke. The mouth of the day drinks light slowly and gives it back, as courage, and the banks lean close to listen. When the first touch of shade reaches the front of the ark, Moses stands and steps forward the way one might step onto a porch at dusk, gently, grateful for the day, ready to listen, and the staff in his hand rests more than leans, companion, rather than crutch, and he speaks in a voice softened by nearness, telling the people not of command, but of remembrance, because crossing is not an argument against what was. It is an honoring of how far the breath has learned to travel, and he asks them to gather memories the way one gathers smooth stones, to carry in the mind the taste of manna that arrived like morning on the ground, the shade of the cloud that never forgot its task, the flame that stood all night like a friend, and to carry to the moments when thirst was met by water entering the world from a patient rock. And he says, let us go over with our gratitude awake, because gratitude knows how to walk on waterlight without breaking it. Memory loosens its fist and opens a hand where the future can sleep without fear for a while. They rise together and walk the bank, not to measure the ford, not to test the depth, but to greet the river like a neighbor whose fence is a hedge of living green. And each sees something to keep, the way light makes coins on the surface, and then spends them one by one, the way a branch enters the current and does not panic, but adjusts, pointing its leaves downstream like prayer flags that know where prayers go. The way stones under the water look larger than they are, teaching the eye that humility is the true size of things. And someone points to where minnows rearrange sunlight into scales of quick brightness, and someone else learns the sound of the bank as it answers the shore with little answers of pebbles. And a child notices that wet footprints shine for a moment, and then darken, and then disappear, which is a sermon without words on how even joy needs to be released. Humility becomes a lens through which everything is seen in right size, and the heart learns to bow and rise. As the sun leans west, the air gathers the sweetness of damp earth and crushed leaf, and the camp prepares its evening the way they have always done, but softer, with more looking, with more shared silence between tasks, and the fires are small, because the night itself will shine with waterlight and starlight and the slow pulse of the pillar that has become their old companion. And the meal becomes a liturgy of enough, each piece of bread passed hand to hand slower than hunger requires, each sip of water taken as if it had a name, and voices keep low, not for fear of waking a danger, but for reverence, toward a kindness that has taken a long time to arrive. And when the lamps are shaded, the water keeps speaking, a respectful murmur like two friends exchanging the days. Last 4 sentences, and those sentences are all you need to sleep. What they share becomes sweeter for being shared, and the night begins to glow from within the circle. Night gathers not as a curtain dropped, but as a shawl laid across shoulders one by one, and the river becomes a band of ink in which the moon dips its quill and writes brightness along the margin, and the reeds turn their applause into whisper, and the camp settles into the kind of sleep that travelers call first sleep, deep but ready. And in that sleep there are dreams that do not feel like dreams, but like rooms entered with bare feet, rooms with floors of cool stone and low bowls of fruit, and windows that frame branches that move like the slow hands of someone blessing. And the waking that comes after such sleep keeps the dream's temperature, a quiet warm enough to keep thought from shivering. Windows look out onto fields where peace is patient, and waking feels like arriving already home. Before dawn, the mist rises in soft bands that make the world look like a memory remembering itself. And the first birds open quiet throats, and the cloud lifts as if it had always been a hand ready to show the way. And Moses calls the people, not with trumpet or cry, but with the steady cadence of someone who has folded many mornings into one kindness. And he says we cross not to conquer, but to continue. We cross not because the desert failed us, but because it taught us to walk together. We cross because rest has a place to live, and it has sent us an address, and his words do not fall heavy. They fall like dew that knows where leaves are, and the people rise with the tenderness of those who know that their next footsteps will not erase, but fulfill. Crossing continues even after the feet are dry, because the mind learns new bridges. Inside its own quiet, the river waits, not impatient but sure, and the people come forward in families and circles of friendship, carrying the bundles of their long schooling in wilderness gentleness, and as their feet meet the water they feel, not cold shock but a careful welcome, as if the current had been practicing their names by flowing over stones for years. And the bottom holds underfoot like a hand under a child learning to stand, and they go, not in a rush, but in that shared pace they have learned from cloud and fire, from bread and rock, and the water parts around calves and knees and the hems of garments, and mends itself again behind each step, as though to say yes, yes, we will remember you kindly. And on their faces there is that expression people wear when they finally put down a weight they forgot they were carrying. The habit of gentleness makes even strong currents gentle, and no one is hurried past their own pace. Moses follows last with a gaze that moves from face to face, counting not numbers but lights, and the staff in his hand draws a faint line in the water that closes. Again without complaint, because the river understands that the marks of passage belong to memory more than map. And from the far bank children begin to point at the green that rises in tears, at the trees that lean toward the sound of their feet, at the small path that will soon be a road of daily comings and goings, and their pointing is its own prayer, urgent without noise, and the elders stand a little taller as if the years themselves had straightened. And somewhere a bird repeats a phrase that sounds like welcome in a language even sleep can understand. Their pointing becomes a language that the ground understands, and paths open like eyelids after sleep. On the new shore the ground feels different, not softer, not harder, but more listening. And when they step onto it, the land seems to shift its weight slightly, as if to say welcome. Let us learn one another's timing, and the wind arrives from between branches fluted with light, and plays the edges of their clothing with the intimacy of old. Friendship finally meeting again in a new room, and the people do not cheer, because cheering would break something delicate. They breathe together, which is a quieter celebration, but lasts longer, and they set down what they carried in a ring, like a wreath laid around a table yet to be set. And they look back once, not to hesitate, but to thank. The quietest kind of joy can be heard, the kind that needs no music, because it is music. Moses climbs a little rise, and looks back where the river coils, silver where it shows, ink where it hides, and he feels the road behind him gather into a single long thread that does not tangle. And he understands that the gift of the desert is not erased by the gift of the land. The first is the loom, and the second is the cloth, and he blesses both with the same breath. And when he turns forward, the trees seem to widen their doors, and the far hills, blue with distance, carry the shape of rest in their shadows, and he knows that arrival is not the end of listening, it is the deepening of it. And he smiles, the small smile that belongs to those who have learned that gentleness is stronger than stubbornness. Even the farthest hill whispers a welcome, and the old ache in the shoulders forgets itself. Night on this side is different. It has crickets and small rustles, and a coolness that drifts down from leaves the way snow would if snow were warm. And the stars are partly hidden but nearer for it, like friends who sit closer when you move indoors, and sleep comes not as a rescue from weariness, but as an added kindness to a day already kind. And in that sleep each person carries a fragment of water sound, a leaf shadow, a breath that did not exist yesterday, and all these fragments braid themselves into morning. As surely as night braids itself into dawn, crickets stitch the edges of silence neatly, and the sky breathes with them in careful time. If you are listening now, lie down by this river in your imagination and let its patient syllables collect your day. Let the green beyond it tilt toward you the way welcome tilts a chair. Let the wind that has walked deserts and orchards learn your name again, not loudly, not with spectacle, but with the careful persistence of a friend who remembers your first stories and your latest ones. And as you breathe, let each exhale be a small crossing from effort to ease, from thinking to simple being, from the old rooms where fear kept the furniture too close together into the wide room where everything has space to sit. The day lays down like a lion at rest, and nothing threatens the small hours as they pass. They wake to a morning that seems to have rehearsed itself exactly for them. Light entering through leaves in narrow rivers that run across the ground and pool on faces, and the smell of the green is stronger, a sweetness braided with clean damp, bark and a faint spice of something flowering unseen, and they learn a new sound that will never leave them, the small ongoing applause of countless leaves answering the wind, a sound that says continue, continue, you have not done this before, and yet you know how to do it. And the people gather their simple things and laugh softly as if not to disturb the delicate stitching the night has done between their breath and the breath of this place. The door between thinking and dreaming hinges without creak, and the passage is kind both ways. They begin to walk the first path that is not only between places but within a place, a path that will remain even when they sleep. A path that will remember their feet and teach the soil the pattern of their going and returning, and as they walk, they discover small courtesies the land has prepared, stones gathered naturally into steps where the hill decides to rise, a narrow shelf of earth strong enough to carry a full jar down to a stream, a clearing just the size of a long conversation where the light falls like quiet approval. And every courtesy returns one they learned in the desert, where patience was. Shade and shade was mercy, and they nod to the trees as one nods to a generous host whose table is still being set. The old fear that asked for proof now finds itself satisfied by the softness of ordinary mercy. At midday they stop by a spring that stitches itself out of the hill with the precision of someone who mends in good light. And when they cup the water, it carries the chill of somewhere deep and the clarity of something with nothing to hide. And they do not gulp, they taste, then taste again, and each sip is a bell rung inside the ribs, and laughter comes easily afterward. Not loud, not careless, but the kind that opens the chest like a window opened onto a quiet street, and Moses watches this and nods as if a long theorem had finally balanced itself in silence, as if the answer had been simple and waited only for the right room to be heard. In the afternoon they begin to name what had been unnamed for them. This is a sycamore, this is a fig sapling, this is time holding its perfume low to the ground. This is a path of ants carrying the world in grains, this is a hawk writing its circles in slow ink above, and these namings are not ownership, they are recognition. the same way a traveler looks into the eyes of a host and says, "I see you." And the land, being recognized, leans a little closer, offering the easier angle up a slope, the softer shoulder to set a basket on, the right length of shade for an old man's rest. And Moses smiles because he sees that language has always been about nearness, and that nearness is why words were given feet as well as tongues. As shadows lengthen, they gather at the edge of a meadow that carries a whisper of bees, and the grass bends with the weight of evening light and then springs back, and a gentle fatigue arrives that is more like fullness than depletion, and the fires they light smell different here, a resin sweetness from fallen twigs that the children have collected with hushed excitement, and bread warms on stones that have never known this kind of service, and the meal, though simple, holds a new flavor that no one can name and no one needs to, and the people eat with faces turned as often toward the trees as toward the bowls, as if to include the leaves in the blessing. Moses sits with the elders and spreads the map that cannot be drawn, the one that lives in his hearing and in the hush between his breaths. And together they speak of the kindnesses of the river, of where the ground seemed to bow slightly under their first steps, of where the trees offered shade as if aware of guests. And they plan not conquest but stewardship, not the quick shout of arrival but the long vow of dwelling. And the elders' eyes shine with the sober joy of gardeners who have been given unworried seasons and the tools of patience. When the moon lifts itself above the eastern ridge, it finds a camp that dozes in gratitude, and Moses walks once more to the water and kneels, not to ask but to thank, and the words of thanks rise slowly, each one touching both deserts and orchards, both hunger and this new abundance. And when he falls silent, the sound that remains is the thin silver of the stream and the wide quiet of leaves and the far soft talk of night animals going about their diligent errands. And in that orchestra he hears a familiar motif, the hum that carried them across the dry years, now braided with the river's key. Before sleep takes them entirely, he speaks to the people in a voice that could be mistaken for the wind through the reeds. And he tells them that the rest they are entering will have its own work, that gentleness has weight to carry, that peace asks for hands as surely as labor did. And he tells them to keep the Sabbath of their hearts even on busy days, to set down their baskets long enough to remember that they were once carried. And he tells them that songs must be learned for orchards, as well as for deserts, for kitchens, as well as for crossings, and that both kinds of songs please the one who led them. They sleep as if the ground itself were a cradle, and the dreams that visit are complex but kind, full of hands planting, of rain arriving at the right hour and leaving quietly, of neighbors whose names are learned by listening more than asking. And in the morning there is a soft astonishment that the trees are still there, that the water has not retreated, that the air still tastes of green, and someone laughs with relief. And the laughter spreads like a warm cloth being unfolded and laid over a table that had been waiting for it. The second day teaches them the language of terraces, of how a hill can be asked nicely to hold the shape of a garden, of how stones like patient elders will keep the soil where it needs to rest if you stack them with respect, of how paths prefer to curve because rigid lines tire the feet and the eyes. And children learn to move among saplings carefully, and goats learn the new edges, and the people find that work has returned but without the lash, carrying instead the rhythm of songs that were born in the shade of vines. Moses walks with the slow pride of a father whose children have found their footing, and he remembers the bush that burned without burning, the sea that parted without shouting, the rock that poured water without hoarding, and he understands that the secret has never been spectacle but steadiness. Not the earthquake, but the daily bread that arrives like a quiet visitor. And he blesses the baskets as they are woven, the doorways as they are measured, the places at the edge of the camp where wild meets home, and both are allowed to be themselves. In the cool of late afternoon, they assemble stones, not to mark victory, but to remember mercy. Flat stones laid without mortar, a small altar that looks like a low table where gratitude could sit and rest its elbows. And Moses places on it a handful of grain and a small cup of water and a sprig of thyme, and says with simple words that the land and the giver of the land are not separate in their generosity. And the people answer not with thunder, but with the Amen, that is the long breath after tears. The Amen that sits down because standing is no longer necessary to be strong. Twilight drifts down through branches, and fireflies appear in hesitant intervals, like thoughts that require a calm mind to notice them. And the camp hums softly with ordinary industry that has learned to be tender, and there is time for stories that take their time, for the long version of how we arrived, for the paused and resumed memory that gathers children close and lets old ones rest their eyes while still hearing. And across the water the reeds keep time, and the river answers, occasionally with a soft agreement that sounds like yes, you were carried, yes, you were carried still. When the first true night settles on this new shore, it feels as if the sky has come closer to see how they are doing. And the stars nod in their positions as if they, too, agree that this is a good place for breath to live. And sleep comes too. Each tent and mat like a small boat touching a familiar dock after a long crossing, and nothing hurries, and no one is left behind. And the pillar glows lower, as though saying, I am near even when you forget to look, and the leaves keep their softest counsel until the faintest silver begins to show at the far edge. If you are listening still, let this river become yours for a while. Not a boundary, but a friend that knows how to carry the heaviness away without complaint. Let the green on the other side be the room in your body that has not been dusted in years and is ready now to open its windows. Let the night on this shore bring you the exact quiet you need. Not too little, not too much. The quiet that belongs to finales that understand gentleness and beginnings that do not wake the house too early. And let the breath you take be wide enough to hold both the long walk and the short rest that follows it. And let your eyes close as if they were gates swinging on well-oiled hinges. Morning will find them already blessed for the work of resting, and the work of resting will teach all other work. Toward the small hours the breeze freshens and carries a silver hush up from the water and over the sleeping camp, and it finds your listener's ear as surely as it finds the curve of each tent, and it smooths worry the way a hand smooths the creases in linen before company arrives, and it says in a voice so light it is nearly silence that there is time, there is room, there is bread enough for the day you will wake into, and the ground beneath you will remember how to hold you, and the river beside you will remember how to speak, and the trees above you will remember how to shade without hiding. And you are held in all these remembrances as in a woven sling that has carried travelers since the first path learned how to bend. And when morning finally unbuttons the horizon and slips a pale seam of light through the trees, you will rise in the easy cadence the journey taught you. You will wash your face in water that has learned your name. You will taste fruit that the night colored slowly, and you will take the first steps of dwelling with the same unhurried courage by which you once took the first steps of leaving. And every step will be a prayer too simple to need words, and every breath will answer it. Block 15. The rest that keeps walking. The days after the crossing move differently, as though the air itself has agreed to measure time not in hours but in the soft turns of seasons. The people wake not to the pull of the cloud or the glow of the fire, but to the quiet insistence of morning light threading between leaves, to the smell of earth that has been watered in the night, to the sound of streams speaking in the steady voice of things that know how to last. The camp, though it no longer needs to fold itself for travel, still begins the day in a rhythm learned from the road, slow rising, shared bread, hands passing water, eyes meeting in the acknowledgement that each morning is a kind of arrival. Moses walks the paths between the tents and the new fields with the same unhurried gait he kept in the desert. The staff in his hand now less a guide and more a companion, its tip tapping the stones as if keeping time with a song only he can. Here he greets those planting in the early light, pauses to taste the first figs of the season, bends to lift a child who has run toward him with arms open. He is not a man searching for the horizon anymore. The horizon has come to meet him here, in the rising green, in the laughter of those no longer bent under forced labor, in the way the air smells after rain. The land has begun to learn their names, answering each step with a firmness that says, "Stay," answering each seed with the patient generosity of growth. The trees remember the hands that touched them on the first day. The water remembers the feet that stood in it to cross. The soil remembers the breath of those who knelt to bless. This memory is not heavy. It is the kind that lightens the work, the kind that makes even weeding a prayer, even drawing water a hymn. Nights here are different from any they have known. Not the vulnerable darkness of the desert, not the guarded quiet of Egypt, but a deep, rooted stillness that holds the sounds of life within it. Crickets sing in steady measure, leaves turn. In their sleep, small animals move in the underbrush with the confidence of creatures who have learned the scent of peace. Fires burn lower now, their light less a signal and more a comfort. Around them, the people speak in the tones of those who do not need to raise their voices to be heard. Stories are told with the long pauses of memory that no longer hurts to touch. Sometimes Moses walks alone to the edge of the settlement, to where the land begins to stretch into what is still wild. He stands there, breathing in the night air, feeling the pull of both directions, the call of the road that taught him patience, and the call of the land that now asks him to dwell. He knows the journey is not over in the way people think. Of endings, it has simply changed its shape. The path now is made of seasons instead of miles, of tending instead of traveling, of deepening instead of reaching. There are days when the people work from dawn to dusk, building, planting, weaving, storing. Yet even in the tiredness of such days there is no edge of despair, no shadow of chains. The work is chosen, and choice carries its own lightness. In the evenings, after the tools are set aside, they gather not out of necessity, but out of the habit of togetherness the desert gave them. They sing new songs that carry echoes of the old ones, the rhythm of walking, the hum of wind through reeds, the low pulse of water at the shore. Moses listens to these songs, and hears in them the hum that once held them in the night between. Egypt and freedom. It is still here, only quieter, woven now into the very air of this place. He knows that as long as they remember how to hear it, they will not lose the thread of who they are. On certain mornings, mist clings to the fields. Long after the sun has risen, and the people move through it slowly, as if reluctant to disturb its softness. Children run their hands through it, laughing at the way it curls and reforms. Elders watch from the doorways of their tents, their eyes soft, their mouths curved in smiles that come from somewhere deep. The mist lifts when it is ready, revealing the land fresh and clean, as though it has been blessed again while they slept. The seasons begin to mark themselves gently, blossoms swelling into fruit, rains arriving when the soil calls, fields ripening under the hand of the sun. The people learn the shapes of these rhythms and fit themselves to them, as they once fit themselves to the movement of cloud and fire. They begin to understand that rest is not the absence of work, but the presence of peace in the midst of it. Moses grows older here, his steps slower, his hair white as the blossoms in spring. Yet there is no heaviness in his aging, for he sees the generations rising behind him, their feet already knowing both the road and the field, their hands skilled in building and blessing alike. He tells them the stories often of the basket in the river, of the voice in the desert flame, of the sea that opened like a doorway, of the bread that came without planting, of the rock that gave water, and they listen, not as to legends, but as to the family history that they will tell. In turn, there are evenings when he sits alone, watching the last light spill over the hills, and he feels the same presence that once called his name from the fire. It is quieter now, not because it has grown faint, but because it no longer needs to. Parts cease to be heard. It speaks in the rustle of olive leaves, in the murmur of the stream, in the steady breathing of the people at rest. And Moses answers not with words, but with the simple stillness of a man whose whole life has been shaped to listen. If you are listening now, let this rest be yours as well. You do not need to cross a desert to claim it. It is here in the space, between breaths, in the way your body eases when you know you are safe, in the way your mind quiets when there is nothing left to prove. Let the ground beneath you be enough for tonight. Let the air carry the scent of promises kept. Let the silence hold you as the desert once held its travelers, as the river once lifted its crossing, as the land now keeps its people. Sleep in this rest that keeps walking, and when you wake, carry its quiet with you into whatever road waits next.